Hey, it's your old pal Spoons here with a build video. It's been a while since I've done one of these. I've got Zevzda's JU88A4 and 172 scale. This kit is part of the Heavies group build hosted by Ace of Spades Model Works on Instagram. The Heavies group build is dedicated to any and all heavy bombers from World War II, any faction, any scale. So I went ahead and picked a German bomber because I have nowhere to display a 4-engine Allied bomber. And there's something I kind of like about the German bombers, and we'll get into that a little later. But I picked up some cool aftermarket for this kit, like some 3D printed seat belts, resin machine guns, wheels, and then Tech Mod had this really cool sheet of decals. And they have this Desert Night bomber, which is just too cool to pass up. So I've never built a Zevzda kit before. Thought this group build would be a great opportunity to rectify that. They're very hard to get, obviously, being a Russian company in the circumstances in the world right now. But never having done one before, I thought this would be a cool opportunity to jump in here and see what it's all about. Per use with aircraft, you're going to start in the cockpit. This kit came out in 2009, so the detail isn't crazy, but everything fits together really well. One of the issues you have with this kit is there's a lot of injector pin marks that you're going to have to fill and sand. So here I used VMS black super glue and my reciprocating sander from Zevzda, and it did a really good job of deleting those injector pin marks. I'm really happy with that tool. I'm glad I have it in my arsenal. So this kit I would say is comparable to the Hasegawa JU88, even though that's an older kit. The interior detail isn't anything really to write home about, but it's decent for a 72nd scale kit. Now, the painting instructions called out the interior to be olive drab, which I found kind of peculiar. I'm not the biggest expert on Luftwaffe aircraft, but I know they usually lean into a gray color for the interior. But I just kind of gave myself over to the color callouts on the Zevzda instruction sheet, and I'm using MIG's new Atom paints, which I love. I chose to paint the interior Dunkelgrün, which I thought turned out really well. And then I used Schwarzgrau for this radio compartment, compass compartment. I still can't figure out what this is. We'll know by the end of the video. But it called out these two different interior colors to use inside the fuselage. So on this kit, you have to install the tail wheel before you put the two halves of the fuselage together. So I decided to get it all painted up now, and we'll mask it off later. I busted out the AK Real Colors markers for this. They're rubber black. These are so great for doing tires on your aircraft or your road wheels on your armor. And you can just get them right around the edges. You can plant them right on the edge of the wheel and get good coverage on the tire without getting the rim all black. You can get in nooks and crannies with that fine point. If you add just the slightest bit of pressure, you don't want to destroy the point on that marker, but you can get it kind of to bleed out into those crevices there. I did have to go back and touch up some of the green, but that's no big deal. I really love using these markers this way, and there's going to be some other detail that we pick out in the cockpit with the markers you'll see coming up. And there you have it. There's your tail wheel all painted up, and we'll mask that off later on when we go to paint the main body of this aircraft. So here I'm using the flat black color, and I'm picking out some of these sidewall control panels. If I did this kit again, or I did this kit in the scale again, just seeing the greenhouse canopy, I think I might spring for a photo etch interior set. I didn't do that with this one just because I wanted to see what I could get out of it, and I didn't think the interior was going to make that big of a difference. But moving forward, I have the Hasegawa HE111 in my stash, and I think these bombers would lend themselves really well to a PE set on the inside. So again, just picking out this detail, they cover really quick. You want to do them over paint. These markers do not like bare plastic. So just make sure you're doing them on a painted surface, because you'll be spending way too much time getting the coverage you want. So here I'm going to use the AK Real Color Marker White, and then I'm going to use their aluminum marker to pick out some dials and switches and knobs on some of the radios and control panels here. So you don't need to add a lot of pressure with these. All you got to do is really just touch the top of that detail, and the surface tension from the paint will hold it where you placed it, and it'll give you really good detail, and you don't have to worry about it overflowing onto surfaces and things like that. Now, I do try to use the aluminum marker on that bank of switches down in the bottom right, and it doesn't work out too well. So in a situation like that, I would recommend just going back to the old hairy stick and the dry brush method if you're trying to pick out detail like that. But as you can see here, you come along and you just give it, look, you just give it a little kiss, just give it a little smooch. And that paint holds right where it needs to, just right on the top of that raised detail, and you get some really nice effects with your dials and switches and things like that. Now I'm going to use the red-brown color for the cushions and headrests on the seats here. These being acrylic, so I used a hairdryer quite a bit through this just to blast that first coat, and so I could go back over it with the second coat, and I could work fast that way. So you can hit them with a hairdryer, and then you could also clean them up with water. So if you do too much, or you want to wear them out, you want to do some sort of effect, you can just use the old tap water. And being an acrylic, so you can blend it into things, or you can completely erase what you did. So they're pretty forgiving in that way. Now we're going to add in our little bomb sight. I did the same thing with the markers you saw on the inside. I picked out some of this detail, and we're going to add the control yoke. This thing was a little fiddly, and you're going to see I almost knock it off a couple of times, and I think during this process I probably had to sit there and re-glue it, and it was a little difficult. I didn't like the way that matched up with this part. It was a little frustrating. Not a mojo killer, but annoying. When I got everything in place there, I just did the good old dry brush. I used the Vallejo metallic silver, and I just went over all the raised area and the area that you see a lot of traffic, like the floorboards or the seats. Did the same for the sidewalls of the cockpit, so made that detail pop, also made it look a little worn, a little lived in. Okay, our first bit of aftermarket for this kit is going to be these 3D printed seat belts from Babibi Model. These are 3D printed decals. It looks like they partnered up with MiG to achieve this project. And these are just your standard 1/72nd scale Luftwaffe seat belts. So I have multiple of them. I'll be using them in more kits. A good look at them. The 3D printed lends itself really well to these because you get all the lumps and bumps and the textures you really like that make them, give them that weight and that realism. As you can see here in the instructions, everything you're seeing in the instructions is what you see on the decal. So all the colors and the buckles and the stitching and the fabric. I really enjoyed these. My application process was the trusty glue looper with diluted PVA glue. I treated these almost like wallpaper, kind of just coating a section of the decal and then applying it to the kit. The diluted PVA glue, real easy to clean up. I'm not racing against the time with super glue, and if there's any left over, it's going to dry clear. Another big plus of these is how they lay. They really have that physical appearance of fabric laying over an object or laying in the seat, so they kind of have, you know, those soft bends and those bunches to them, and they're super easy to work with. I think moving forward, I'm going to look for 3D printed seat belts as opposed to photo etch. With these, there's no harsh bending, there's no burrs to clean up, and they don't go pinging off into oblivion if you can't hold them in your tweezers properly. But as you see here, they have just such a true physical form I really enjoyed. Now assembling the rest of the kit, it went together really well. I just want to point out Make sure you clean up your joint connections so you're not gluing paint to paint. You'll see here I have bare plastic that I scraped away with a hobby knife. I like to make sure glue to glue. That's just real basic. That's rookie stuff, okay? That's day one stuff, so always remember that. Plastic to plastic, not paint to paint. So that's what I tried doing here. This kit really impressed me fit-wise. I thought being an older kit, maybe being a Russian kit, maybe there wasn't, a great track record with these, that it was going to fight me. And with almost everything on this kit, it fit really well. There are some issues that are going to come up. Seams to be filled, some joints that need to be sanded. But it's nothing, again, that's going to kill the mojo. Annoying, maybe, but definitely not a deal breaker. Everything really flush. All the joints go together really well. The hardest part I have, and you'll see that coming up, is the engine nacelles are maybe a little bigger than where they're supposed to meet up on the wing root, and then we have some mismold on the fuselage here. But simple fixes. This isn't stuff where you're going to have to break out tons of putty and a lot of elbow grease and cut and fill. So again, given the age of this kit, I'm really happy with how it all went together. It's made it a fun build. I got to break out some modeling skills, but it never became a chore. It never became something that was going to turn this into a shelf queen or, heaven forbid, go in the trash can. So the wings were designed as like a modular design. So you have this inboard wing with the engine nacelle and the root that'll go against the fuselage, and then you'll have the outer wing tip. And you'll build these separately and join them together. You could possibly join them together and then build the full wing. I didn't think about it when I was doing this. But as you can see here, very nice fit, almost no seam around that leading edge. So the fit on this kit really outshines the difficulties, and I'm hesitant to say difficulties with this kit. So as you can see, what I'm doing here is I'm going to join the two halves up, and then on this top part you can see A, I've sanded it down too much so there's a gap, but B, it's going to sit kind of proud. So now that I have the two parts of the wing joined up, you'll see up here on the top surface you can see just a little bit of raised detail there. And you'll get this on either side, so you can push the wing down so it's not on the top, and you'll have the proud joint on the bottom, or vice versa. This is where I think maybe I could have joined the two halves and then joined the full wing together. I don't know that it would have helped. It's really, again, not a huge deal, so we're going to take about some 400 to 600 grit sandpaper here, and then just get it real flush. Try not to delete any of that surface detail. The plus to this issue is that it's designed on a panel line. So you don't have to go back and fill anything, and you don't have to lose really any detail. I did have to go back and rescribe some of these panel lines, but the design of this might be ahead of its time. Sits right on a panel line, so you're not losing a lot. So when I got it kind of sanded flush, I went back with my hobby knife and just real flat, just kind of brought it across that edge, and then hit it again with the sandpaper to make sure that's smooth. Not a big deal, just kind of a goofy fit, but really easy fix. So the landing gear does need some TLC with mold lines. There are quite a bit of mold lines on this kit. I'm one of them weird guys that there's something satisfying about cleaning up mold lines. It's kind of like watching those power washing videos. I don't know, just when they come out clean. So anyway, I cleaned up the landing gear, and really nice detail on these. Again, really impressed with the age of the kit and the detail on this. I thought I was going to get some real lumpy looking landing gear, maybe have to go an aftermarket route, but what they provide in the kit is molded really nice. I can't speak to accuracy because I don't really know my Luftwaffe landing gear that well. I promise you, in the comments, there's somebody out there who knows every little nut and bolt about Luftwaffe landing gear. So let's not write those people off. But I digress. Detail in this, really great. It was a little bit fiddly, but when you got them to fit, they really popped. So they added a lot of meat to this model. In fact, this is one of the parts of the kit that, detail-wise, I probably enjoyed the most. So now we move on to the actual fit issues in this kit. Again, not a deal breaker. You're going to have to do a little bit of work, a little bit of modeling, but it's nothing that's going to end this build. It lies all within the landing gear bay and the engine nacelles. As you can see here, the landing gear is already a snug fit. I had to scour out those connector holes just a little bit to get it in there, but when they fit, they align really nice. It's very snug. They don't wobble either way, so you don't have to worry about them looking wonky trying to get them in there. Now, as you see here, there's two halves of the landing gear bay. This is another problem with the fuselage we'll see here in a minute, is one of them is slightly longer than the other half. So when you get them glued together, I had to make sure that I sanded the back of it down so it would fit evenly with that rear part of that engine nacelle or whatever that sits at the back of the wing. And of course there's a pretty big seam here, so I didn't want to pressing it together wasn't going to get it where I needed it to be. It was going to make it too short for the fitting on the bottom of the wing. So I broke out the VMS Flexi Black Super Glue. This stuff is phenomenal for filling seams. It's got some rubber in there, so like it says, it's flexible. It gets down into that seam. You know, it dries hard, so it's easier to sand. And by the way, there's people way smarter than me that know all the chemical process and the blah, blah, blah that makes this stuff great. But I really love it. So if you're an airplane guy and you're filling seams, get this stuff. Another wonky fit issue with this kit was the outboard engine nacelles. Now they come in 3 pieces, as you just saw, with that outer radiator portion and then the top and the bottom. They fit really well together. And then you can see they have this gap where the exhaust stacks are going to go. But that makes the outboard nacelle circumference larger than the inboard circumference. So I use the old pinch and squeeze method to get it to fit. I decided to focus on the lower half because I didn't want to lose that detail sanding on that lower half, and I didn't want to mess up my landing gear if I had to go and sand any of that flush. Now, since I squoze this piece together, it pushed this joint out where our exhaust stacks are supposed to go. So that's going to require some sanding on the back side of this piece to make sure it sits flush within that slot. And here you can see where the nacelle joint still sits kind of high. There's a step there, so that's going to get filled in with the VMS black super glue, and we're going to sand that down. So as far as fit goes, this is one of the first big issues I had, was getting these nacelles fitted up properly. So just some elbow grease, black super glue, sandpaper, you'll take care of it real easy. It's nothing that's too daunting. Another goofy issue I ran into this kit was the alignment of the panel lines. As you can see here, these vertical panel lines don't line up. They're just off, just a hair. So while I was filling in the seam along the spine of the fuselage, I just used my black super glue to fill in these panel lines, and then I just sanded it back and rescribed them using the left-hand side of the fuselage as the template to line up the panel lines. The way this kit was fitting together, it was weird that the panel lines didn't line up properly, but it's not too hard of a fix, just a goofy situation. I don't know if the tail fit was a kit issue or my fault, but I'm going to go ahead and claim it as mine because I did a lot of sanding on the back end of this fuselage here, correcting those panel lines and that seam. I'm sure I got rid of too much material there that left that big gap, but that's okay because I broke out some of the styrene sheets here and then cut a couple strips and plugged that gap up, and then over the top of it I came in with Vallejo putty to make sure everything was sealed in there and it looked nice and smooth and flush. So this is builder error. I'm gonna go ahead and take the L on this one. I don't think I could blame the kit. The Tamiya orange cap came out for the wings. The real goopy stuff does a great job of welding that big surface area to the fuselage. There was absolutely no fit issue with the wings. They lined up perfectly, they fit perfectly. There was no gaps that I had to fill. There was no dihedral I had to work with. I was really happy that I didn't have to mess with the wing roots on this kit, so that's a big plus. And of course I got that Edward pre-cut canopy mask for this kit. It was really helpful, especially with these big bulbous greenhouse canopies that the German bombers tend to have. So this was the fit issue with the fuselage, going back to the panel lines being off. One side of this fuselage is just a bit longer than the other half, so to get my nose glass to fit up properly, I had to go back and sand that side of the fuselage. So this is the aesthetic I really enjoy about the World War II German bombers, is these giant greenhouse noses and cockpits you see like on the HE-111 or Ju-88 or Do-217. They have this very sinister sci-fi look to them. It almost looks like some sort of alien robot insect that's come screaming out of the clouds, and it has all these lenses on its giant eye, and it's going to hunt you down. I think it really adds to that sinister aesthetic you think of when you think of Nazi bomber. So that's a wrap on Principal Construction. Stay tuned for part 2 where we paint this bad boy.